Our guests today, Yemi Oshinaye. Yemi, CIO, Department of Homeland Security, Transportation Security Administration. It's a mouthful. He was the U.S. CIS, Deputy CIO for 3 years. He was the CTO in private sector. He's a Georgetown Hoya. I love this guy. He's a rock star in government. He's one of those folks you want to be in the room with and listen to. Super excited to have you today, Yemi.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
You got it, my man. We've got Jordan Henry, cyber engineer, cyber physical systems, National Renewable Energy Lab, in this role at NREL since January from earlier this year. His roots, though, go back to that national laboratory ecosystem in the Sandia National Lab. For those of you who know about our national treasures, he is Energy Security and Resilience Center dude at the NREL, and he's got some just crazy neurons, and he's wicked smart, and he is a Missouri University of S&T graduate, which I found out their mascot is Joe Miner. So, you know, it's a dude. Is that right, Jordan? Is it just a...
Yeah, it's a miner, and he carries a gun and a slide rule. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting mascot. Yeah, maybe build that in and maybe what that meant to you. But at the end of the day, it's not the University of Missouri. It's of S&T, Science and Technology. We've got Will LaForest, Field CTO, Chief Technology Officer, whatever you want to put in front of the word CTO. I've gotten to know Will. He's a UVA grad. He's double major guy, math, physics, science, computer stuff, but he's a storyteller. Works at Confluent, great company, doing great things in government. Super to have Will here as well. And he's going to dispel a lot of the myth about understanding how data streaming and batch processing and real-time streaming, need to exist together, but nothing is necessarily better than other. It's an evolution. So Will, fired up to see you.
Yeah, thank you, man.
All right. And last but definitely not least, served our country, Sean Applegate, CTO, 6 years at Swish. I know it's Swish Data, but it's Swish, and I love the way it just rolls off my tongue. Coast Guard, DOD, DHS, VA, focused on team culture and data. Sean Applegate, you have some great stories you're going to share today. Fired up to have you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking forward to diving into the stories and hopefully a little bit of data.
I love it. Facts tell, stories sell. So without further ado, this is what I always do. I try my best because I don't read bios. I'm going to kick it back to my man, Yemi. Yemi, a little bit about your passion, your role, and why this topic matters to you so much.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with talking about, why I'm here. As folks know, I've been in and out of the government in my whole career. And to be honest, I was with DHS since I started. So, I was around just coming out of college right before 9/11 happened. Like most of us, we felt that burn and just ran to the fire. And then we've been supporting and protecting the country ever since. I can tell you right now, in all of the roles I've had since I was a developer, a DBA, working on infrastructure, data has always been the cornerstone of what we use to be able to solve problems. From a technology perspective, we make sure that we put it in the right frame so that users, the mission folks, can actually use it to make decisions. Not just that, we want to make sure that you have a 360-degree view of data, because the same data can help you make 100 different decisions. So, I'm passionate about making sure that we're always at the head of the curve with technology and really at the head of the curve with understanding data. Because if you don't do it right, you can see a lot of information that allows you to make the wrong decision. So I'm just passionate about moving a mission forward.
I appreciate that. I took away cornerstone 360 view. And again, folks, Yemi is a federal thought leader, executive. He's not here to do anything, I think, other than share the kind of things that if you have a chance to meet him or anyone on his staff, because we talked about it, it's come bring what you could think could be a solution to the challenges that face TSA. This isn't a one size fits all. So Yemi, I just wanted to emphasize that. I hope you're cool with it.
Absolutely, appreciate it.
All right, brother. Okay, let's kick it down to Sean. Sean, a little bit more about you that I didn't fill the blanks in on well enough.
Yeah, probably, from a doing the mission fast, what's critical for me is be able to make those decisions efficiently and effectively across the team. And like Yemi said, it's about the team working together. And my first job was really in the Marine Corps at a Special Operations Command. And we had to get 2,500 Marines to execute a mission in 6 hours. And so when you talk about making fast decisions with data across lots of organizations, it mattered. And doing that across large organizations, whether it's Customs and Border Protection or DOD, or it's energy and our industry partners, it's absolutely critical that that data is real time and it's easy for everybody to find. The biggest challenge we bring to the table normally at Swish is connecting those dots from mission partners to the IT folks to the security team, so they can all understand how to work well together at a cultural level and understand how they can achieve the mission together. And tearing those silos down is absolutely critical in real-time data.
Awesome. And I think that's going to be key, is real-time making decision as data is coming to versus that catch it, or when it's generated, it has to be stored. I like to use the Harvard Business Review perspective on the data lifecycle, folks. And again, just Google data lifecycle, you'll see there's a lot that goes from the generation to visualization, but having information now in that millisecond can save lives. Think of our nation's critical infrastructure sectors, power grid, water systems, things like that. So Sean, and we're super excited to hear about the activities you're doing at the DHS, and we'll hear about that in a bit. Jordan Henry, it was great seeing you, obviously at the DOE downtown. I know you're out here on the East Coast. A little bit more about you, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Yeah, so Pete kind of mentioned chief cyber engineer at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Been in the DOE complex pretty much my whole career thus far. Background in power systems, power electronics, but then one of those folks who moved over to the dark side and turned into a cyber geek. So I've been doing that for the better part of 15 years. So yeah, just a little bit too on NREL, since I know that the DOE complex isn't something that folks are super familiar with sometimes, is that, NREL, its focus and leadership is really achieving clean energy, right? A clean energy future. And that includes leadership in renewable energy, decarbonization, electrification efforts, grid integration, and cybersecurity. And so as the chief cyber engineer, I've been really focused on helping lead NREL's team in developing cutting edge, impactful cybersecurity research for kind of scalable and quantifiable risk reduction to this energy transformation that we're seeing. So we're really focused not just on where we're at today, but moving forward into the future. And so this topic of data culture, right, from mission to kind of riff off what Sean had mentioned, and that real-time data is incredibly important. If you think about the power grid and energy, electrons move at the speed of light. And so making decisions very quickly are sometimes critical to the safety and reliability of the energy system. So heavy reliance on data kind of embodies all of that. And it's not really just the sheer quantity of data, which we're seeing, but we're also seeing this shift into kind of this sharing of information and data between stakeholders, more stakeholders than what we've seen in the future. So hopefully, through this time, I'll be bringing kind of a perspective on that change and how data is becoming increasingly important to that mission in the energy grid.
Oh, I'm sure you will. And again, Jordan, you hit on this critical infrastructure theme. Folks, the bipartisan infrastructure law, go read a little bit about it. Google, or should I say search on the word data as a strategic asset. You're going to see how critical in a world that's littered with Internet of Things stuff, connectivity, zero trust. All this applies into this data discussion. Again, the title of this is Creating a Data Culture to Deliver on Mission. Nowhere in this conversation, please lose the fact that it isn't easy to sell into the government. It's more about seeking and solving. Okay, and these are folks that represent that community, that culture, that we have to bring it together. And there's an onus on government to be available. And then those of you who market to or brand yourselves as a unique, not silver bullet, you got to speak and do your homework, but speak to the mission of government, get to know the people and their mission before you go have a meeting. That's my 2 cents. With that, Will LaForest, Confluent, close us out on these brief intros. Tell us a little bit more about your journey and why this is such a cool topic for you.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm a field CTO, and I guess Confluent's a little bit unusual in our space in that we don't actually have a corporate CTO. Maybe that's because our CEO is kind of nerdy. But in any event, we have 3 field CTOs, and one of the things I think is really cool about that is it really gives us a great customer and use case perspective. So essentially, I have the privilege of talking to customers and helping them on their journeys in adopting data streaming, data motion architectures, making real-time decisions, driving real-time mission, et cetera. And for me, this is across the Americas to include government. But, I spent a large portion of my career working in this space. So the government's near and dear to my heart. And I think as I was joking with you a couple of weeks back, it's great working on cool use cases like, real-time supply chain or improving customer experiences, delivering real-time coupons. But when I come back and talk to government, we're talking about missions where lives and the nation's future is on the line, and it's pretty motivating and rewarding. And this is exactly why I love this topic, though, because leveraging data as a strategic asset in government can really have a profound impact on humanity, not just a company's bottom line, which is also important, but just not to the same degree.
Sure. And again, folks, listening in, humanity is what the objective is, whether it's extending life or having more information to make decisions. Jordan brought up the term reliability with the grid. Resilience is different than reliability. Bad stuff happens, physical disasters, data and information at our fingertips in a real-time manner with tools like, if it's underpinned with Kafka, with a tool like Swish, with a tool from Swish, or a Confluent ability to map certain needs for your agency. Those are the kind of things that align capability to mission. And then when you present that to a guy like I was in a former life as a Fed, I loved hearing industry say, we think we can help you with that problem that you were talking about. So let me bring it back to Yemi. And Yemi, again, in this safe harbor space of open government, being collaborative, transparent, participatory, that was ushered in 2009. You have a unique role as one of the components of DHS, where information sharing, and I quote, is very, very important to the agency. And there's a number of places people can go to learn about it. I'd like you to kick off just your perspective, especially being a DevOps kind of guy, this technology underpinning mission. Whether it's a requirement or just when you have those days when you can ideate and brainstorm to move the needle at TSA, how important is that open government principle, triangulation of meeting with vendors, and what do you hope they do when they have a chance to meet you? Because it's fact that you're dealing with cloud, you're dealing with IoT, you're dealing with data. What is a message you want to convey at the outset of how you could use their help to help map your strategy?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think, one of the things I like to do is when I meet with vendors and even other folks just outside of government, is the groundwork is to understand what we do. I always say, if you ask me what I do every day I make the transportation sector better. That's my job. That's everybody's job in TSA. So when we engage, that's the first place we have to start talking. Will mentioned something about data in motion. Now, when you bring that mission with a concept like that, it's so very important, because if you talk about an individual that is going to enter a transportation area from a non-sterile area to a sterile area, the first thing we're trying to do is, should that person be where they should be? And if you think about data and it's in the whole 360 degree, that same person weeks later could be driving a truck and taking goods to a certain place. Should that person be driving that truck? And the way we do that is looking at data, making sure it's available, and understanding, what is, and folks at CBP will understand this, what is an encounter? When DHS encounters someone, it's different at TSA than it is at CBP. But what does that mean for DHS? Should we be looking at how to engage a person based on that information? Should we be looking at a 360 degree of a person? And then you ask the question, what is a person? All that stuff is the groundwork for being able to answer questions that an officer will answer at the checkpoint, or an agent will answer at the border, and it makes their job easier. So we have to constantly, you mentioned innovate and ideate. I mean, we were here over in Colorado Springs having a conversation yesterday about that. We have to constantly be ahead of the game, because there's always a new dimension. I mean, you have new jobs, you have new ways of communicating, whether it's over, Bluetooth and through your car, through the way we advance the technology. So we have to stay ahead of the curve with how to share that data, but share it in a meaningful way that folks at the mission, at the front line, don't have to think more than they need to. They can actually analyze with their job, as opposed to trying to figure out what the data is. So, I mean, it's really important, one, understand the mission, two, understand how we use the data, and three, we all be at the same pace with how we're using technology to answer the question.
Love it. And folks, Yemi mentioned the transportation sector, one of the 16 sectors owned and operated generally from private sector. There are 16 of those. There are 17 labs. There are 450 plus agencies. Everything's tightly aligned. And Yemi, you all that were talking about the the challenges of culture and data, in my view, with silos and, who has the right access, and have we done enough due diligence, and do we have the sufficient tooling? But that's democratizing data and doing that homework and working with companies that say, hey, we think we understand. And that's, again, folks, how you have to have structured surgical discussions with folks like Yemi, in my view, to make sure you're helping solve the problem. So Sean, let's let you and Will kind of, let's go to you, Sean, first. I mean, you're working with DHS. What are some of the use case where data challenges, i.e., yes, silos exist? What are some things you're doing specifically? Maybe you want to talk about your Coast Guard work, that it's enlightening the agency to see the power of technology, giving them those insights that Yemi talked about.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I think DHS is a great example. Coast Guard's a part of that. And sharing that data across teams is really difficult, especially in older architectures where you might have a mainframe or a legacy system, and you don't want people hitting that direct. And so if you can take a financial system or maybe a DoD system that Coast Guard uses or another agency exposes to them, and you need the data out of it, it's real easy to historically do a query into it, but that's very fragile and brittle, and they often don't want you hammering the database for performance reasons. And so if you put together an enterprise service bus like Confluent, you can pull those things out real time out of the database logs, if you will, or the database if you want to change data capture type mechanisms, or they can feed it to Kafka directly. And what that allows us to do is then open that data up, share it in a governed environment with lineage and trust and quality. And you can also expose it in different ways or hide things you don't want other people to see. So you're not giving away any PII data if you shouldn't do that. But you at the edge of the workforce, the people that own the applications, have control of sharing that, right? You've democratized the ability to unleash the value of the data, but also control what people can get and what they can see. And all of a sudden you can tie things together. You can join the data together. So if you want to join, for example, terrorist data from a couple of different agencies with a port of access the Coast Guard monitors, or fishery units and cutters that are deployed, a couple miles off the coast looking for drug cartels, bringing drugs in, for example, which is a common mission they do. That real-time data, getting that data of, hey, there's a boat, transporting drugs off the coast of Florida, and it's 10 miles out and it's moving in this direction, this speed, and getting that within seconds is much better. And when you can do that across law enforcement and CBP and the cutters from the Coast Guard, because seconds matter when you're chasing a boat doing, a 90 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour, right? Seconds matter. Same thing for drug mules down at the border when they're pulling stuff through, and Customs and Border Protection has to look for that data. And law enforcement might be supporting that mission to an extent locally on the ground, feet on the ground, or people from task force from the DoD. Getting those agencies to work together in real time where seconds matter is really tricky. And being able to send that into a single place where people can subscribe to it and pull it proactively is amazing. And they can work together better than ever.
Well, good points. And Will, I'm going to come to you because, again, you're a company that feels it can complement investment in government. Folks, I use that, there is no silver bullet, but there's a lot out there to pick from. And I would say, Yemi, I'm not going to speak for you, but it's not like every day of the week and twice on Sunday you're reading Gartner reports or Forrester reports saying, hey, I want to bring in and do a bake-off. Will, when you think about Confluent and its uniqueness, and every company, in my view, is unique, it's how do you convey how it can complement an investment that an agency has? This rip, replace, land, expand. I'm not one to ever promote that because I just feel like as a former Fed, I got a lot of tools. I want them all to work together. What are some of those opportunities from your perspective when you're talking about, cloud native and real-time batch processing or streaming of data? What do you talk to agencies about the uniqueness of Confluent?
Yeah, well, I want to get back to something that Yemi mentioned when he was talking about how they have data, but then they have like hundreds of usages of the same data. And I think one of the fundamental, and I'll get to Confluent and how we help this, but I think one of the fundamental things that we need to do if we want to start democratizing data, it's like, it's not magic. We can't just say it and it happens, right? You need to think of your data as a product. And you can't possibly, if you want to democratize your data and you want to get value from it, you can't possibly imagine all the different usages of it a priori. Like, you don't know what it's going to be. And I think that's one of the powerful things that Confluent enables, which is the idea that I can take my data set and I can provide it in real time so that anyone who needs the data and has permission to access the data can do so, right? But the person who's producing it doesn't necessarily have to know who those people are. Like they just need to say, oh yeah, well, it requires this amount, this security. And so, you know, this fundamental concept is one of the reasons why Kafka and Confluent's really taken off, is just the ability to allow data to flow in real time across organization, or in some cases across organizations. So in the government space, this means we're helping customers with things like cybersecurity, right? Lots of data coming from lots of different security sensors. There's not a single tool that's going to be the best fit for that, right? I'm sure there's vendors out there that want to be the single tool, but there's not, right? So how do we enable that at the massive scales that it comes in at to be routed the right tools at the right time? IoT, critical infrastructure, huge use case for us, because, you know, the government's moving there. And like last week I was, or a few weeks ago, I was in Cincinnati talking to leaders from the Midwest, so local government. And they're getting the sensors deployed in their highways and mass transit, but they're struggling to make use of the data. And so part of it is because of sort of they haven't gotten there in terms of the data culture and the ability to harness that and then provide it to the people who need it. So every person who needs it needs to figure out how to get to the source, and you end up with this massive combinatorial explosion. And so that tight, you know, integration is not very scalable. So IoT data is a huge use case for us. But yeah, we're used across a variety of missions in the government.
So Will, and I'm going to come to Jordan here. I just want to, you know, I heard this, and again, you made a great point. The federal government's become very bullish on the Internet of Things. It has an advisory board, it has working groups, the IoT folks. If you're listening, or I hope you are, zero trust, no more perimeters. Yes, you could still have an on-prem solution for things where I want to put my data. Jordan, I'm going here with the cloud and data and, you know, energy sector. You have a lot to consider. You got to have the right tools and access, cybersecurity access. You can trust a sensor. A sensor's not there to do a bad thing. It's how are you implementing? And that's the people part. That's the part, Yemi, I know you do so well. And that are, again, DHS, 4 key elements: our architecture to share information, the National Network of Fusion Centers, the Nationwide Suspicious Activity Reporting Initiative, National Terrorism Advisory System. If you see something, say something. There are principles and guidelines, but it doesn't just happen. It takes leadership, and each of you obviously represent that. And again, it takes a village to build the culture. Thank you, Will. We'll come back. Jordan, let's talk about that cloud and analytics a little deeper, because you're doing some exciting stuff around clean energy, but you're also working with some of these owners and operators and industries that want to trust cloud, that want to trust the tools, but also want to protect their customers' intellectual property.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you led this one kind of talking about that bipartisan infrastructure law. And, you know, it's something that's near and dear to our heart right now. You know, we're doing some work, as you mentioned, related to the exchange of information and data, looking at the grid transformation, which is really happening at the distribution system level right now. And so we're really laser focused, you know, not just at the distribution system level, but energy in general. And how do we ensure that, you know, with all these goals in decarbonization, electrification, that cybersecurity is not a barrier to adoption, right, for these things to happen. And so that includes chiefly here the idea of increasing number of stakeholders being enabled to exchange data and information to maintain reliability of the current system that we have. And so, you know, some of those manifest from, you know, utilities talking to other utilities, or a third party or vendor aggregator that needs to talk to, you know, a utility, or me as a ratepayer, my system, let's say my Tesla Powerwall needs to talk to a utility. So there's all of these new connections being made where data has to be exchanged in order to maintain reliability. And the paradox here is that despite this increasing need for data to be exchanged and some of that where cloud is kind of that facilitator of that exchange of information, is that we're in the energy sector, we're really in a information scarce or data scarce environment. There isn't a lot of real information and data that we have that we can collect from the real world to kind of lead us down this path of how do we do this, both from a controls perspective, but also from a security perspective. And so, we're doing a lot of work right now, some of this supporting things that came out of that bipartisan infrastructure law and cybersecurity for distribution systems. We're doing work for DOE to understand cloud and how can cloud be used as an asset, right, for this information exchange. And can we prove to the sector, to the stakeholders that, hey, cloud can be a powerful tool, but it can also be done securely, and those applications are suitable for particular energy applications. So yeah, there's a lot of work that we're doing right now to really understand that, and the grid is changing in a way where increased data isn't just something that's a nice to have, it's a necessary evil at this point, because of market adoption of particular technologies. EVs come to mind, for example. That adoption is so fast that the industry can't actually build out infrastructure fast enough to keep up with that adoption. So it's requiring things like non-wires alternatives or methods in which we can change the way in which we control the system to essentially allow these things to happen without the need to, for example, trench a new line, right, with a bigger pipe to allow more electricity to flow to support those EVs. So there's a lot of work here and really understanding it. And we at the National Laboratory, a complex, not just NREL, but other partners, are really diving into how do we do this and guide industry in a way that, despite this information scarce environment, that we can do it securely.
Yep, I'm seeing some head nodding. I'm having a question come in from my colleague, Brian Ward, and I just want to put out, Brian, again, folks, you can communicate with the speakers through chat directly if you want while they're not speaking. Brian brought up a question about securing sensors. We're talking about IoT. Good news to everybody. If you go to NIST's website, you can search on IoT Advisory Board. There's a free workshop that's going to be kicking off in January. It's a full day event. I encourage you to go hear where the government's going, where industry's going on everything from standards to deployment to use cases. So Brian, I hope that helps. Yemi, let me come back to you. Some of what you've heard so far, in the spirit of there's a lot to consider. And I know everybody who has a .gov email, or should I say a .com email on this, or a .org is like, oh my God, maybe I want to come talk to you about. Can you wrap some of this, like maybe tie in a few of the things you really care about, not what keeps you up at night, but the things that matter when a topic like real-time and data streaming, things you want to hear from industry partners, and the best way to collaborate with you.
Yeah, I will tell you, this conversation is a really good demonstration of what industry and government conversation will look like. I mean, Sean and Will talked about, democratization and governance. And when I sit in front of folks, because, one of my jobs is a translator, right? So, democratization actually puts power of using data in the hands of the mission operator, right? It's saying you can use it. It's pushing the power closer to where the action happens. But again, with that power comes great responsibility. So we need to be able to have a layer of governing. And then, Jordan talked about the ever-changing landscape of how data moves, and data, it changes, and we add data. That's not a burden we want to put on the front lines. So when we engage, Sean talked about a little bit about orchestration. One of the first things I look for is, does the vendor understand the landscape of data? Does the vendor understand complexity and ease of delivery, right? Because, there's a concept of a data pipeline. Like, again, these aren't things that we want the mission operator to have to deal with, but they need to understand that if you want something, if you want certain information, we can get it to you at the speed of light. And how we do that is we do all that upfront work. We do data quality, data cleaning, we do, data tagging. We make sure that we understand where the data could be used, how it can be used, and when because here's the thing, if you have one data repository that we quote unquote own or we're a steward of, and there's a second data repository, once they come together, we kind of take a couple steps back because we have to do it all over again, because now that's a new set of data. Now, when we engage vendors that understand that, we kind of leap forward into the conversation of, how do we ensure there's a consistent pipeline of good data getting to the mission operator? And when do we overlay it with a system When do we overlay it with full democratization where a data scientist can crunch numbers and analyze? And then when do we step back and say, you know what, this is data that probably shouldn't be shared. So we're going to have a really strong layer of governance. And if you need that, you mentioned zero trust, we're going to make sure we know who you are, why you need it, and you're going to have to send us a token for us to give it to you. So, those conversations have to happen. It's kind of like that litmus test. And when we get there, then we take it piece by piece. It's got to be in phases. The other thing about data is there's so much of it. It's so complex that you can't just solve every problem all at once, but we got to find a way of saying, how do we have a lean process of fixing problem A that we know one day when we get to problem J, we can accelerate all the way to Z, right? So these are the conversations. I mean, to reach out to me is pretty easy. I'm usually hanging out on LinkedIn when you chat. Folks that can find me on these panels, I try to get out a lot, and I try to talk to as many people as I can, because we have to learn too. That's the only way we stay fresh, by talking, right?
Yemi, listen, you are a breath of fresh air, and I hope everybody's hearing this. We're going to have this recording. You could watch it again, but you hit on a word called landscape of data. You talk about complexity. You hit on the democratization. Folks, this is what government needs industry partners to come in and speak to. Read their budgets, read their mission statement. Know that TSA is different than USCIS. There may be similarities, data is important, but the landscape of data in TSA is different than its Department of Energy, USDA. Get to know not just Yemi, but the people who work with Yemi, right, Yem? So you're the man. Sean, I see you nodding. Thanks for pushing out the playbook. Again, everybody on this panelist, if you will, platform, send some links out for people to read. Sean and Will, riff off of what Yemi just said from your perspective, partnering with the DHS as you are in other agencies, but what resonated with you?
Yeah, I think one thing Yemi meant was sharing the data, right, and getting it out securely. The ability to govern the data, the security of the data, the trust is really important. We often see that as the number one concern with a lot of application owners that don't want to give their data up because they're worried they're going to give something up that somebody shouldn't have. And unfortunately, we tend to have very bureaucratic cultures in large government agencies, which creates silos. And I would say the one thing with a good framework, if you're going to do real-time streaming telemetry, is to look for one that has awesome governance in it and the ability to mask or integrate tools that can mask, tokenize, and encrypt data so that when you apply the real-time telemetry to different roles, you can give the right level of data or access to the more sensitive data to the right roles or people, and then expose the right data or maybe protect the sensitive data for other people that don't necessarily need that, but they need the cardinality of the data, the statistical value or transactional value of the raw data itself, right? Not summary course data, which is pretty useless. Think of this as a picture that maybe it's real fuzzy if you don't have the right data, but if you have if you do have the proper data or the most forensic data, it's high fidelity. It's like your 4K TV at home versus your old UHF, crummy TV you grew up with. If you're like me, I had 5 channels and you had to turn the antenna in. It was really had a lot of static. Right?
Dude, you're aging yourself. You're aging yourself. Okay, but keep going. You got a good flow going.
Out in the middle of nowhere in Ohio, So. But anyways, I'll throw it over to you, Will, on maybe some of the governance stuff or what do you think is relevant. But those are things that often cause the biggest angst for our customers that are early in their data journey.
Yeah, I mean, actually, Sean, you made a lot of great points there. And I was just in my head, as you was talking, I was running over some of the differences I see in terms of adoption of patterns in the commercial space versus the governments. And something that's become very popular. So I'm constantly hearing from leaders in the commercial space. They're talking about data mesh quite a bit. And data mesh is sort of a pattern that I feel is pretty appropriate for those who are looking to democratize data. But one of the inhibitors, as you said, in the government is sort of a greater sensitivity about how their data is going to be used. So I absolutely think you're right that having the ability to provide proper data governance, so understand who's using the data, being able to provide the right controls on the data is equally important in the government space, especially to enabling customers to actually find that data. And, Yemi was talking about sort of the work that they do in order to ensure that data can be used by the people downstream. So I'm a consumer out there, I need some data. They're doing work to ensure that they get economies of scale. Because what you don't want is everyone, like 10 different programs having to take the same raw data and do the same exact work. Like that doesn't scale. And I think that's a great example where if you look at the principles of data mesh and data democratization, there's sort of an overlap between, like, a big principle there is federated domain data ownership. That is, someone who's producing the data needs to view it as a product. And they need to be able to work independently of another data producer. But there has to be someone also that is helping to drive forward and ensure there's a central place to access this data. And I think that's what Yemi is talking about. Like, there needs to be champions in the government that ensures that these data product owners are producing clean data and that can be found by the other people, et cetera. So yeah, I think it was a great point, Sean. Lineage is really, the data governance is really key to being successful in government.
Yeah, we're using a lot of terms, and Demi, that's something that just spurred a great point, Will. And I'm going to come back to like that cat herding or whatever we call it. Like, Yemi's the CIO, great title. There's a lot of other people who know data, and I'm not going to speak for Yemi, but I'm going to say that probably know their data better than you do. Your job is to be one of those people at the table to help have that discussion about provenance and integrity and quality. So great points, Will and Sean. Hey, let me jump to Jordan, because I know Jordan, we talk a lot that this cloud, do I want it all up there? Do I want it on-prem? And I know you hit on some of it earlier, but can you just, in your own storytelling kind of way, talk about, I think it was you or someone else, cybersecurity, and it's mitigate risk to the vulnerability or the threat, right? And cloud is something that everyone on here knows is a big part of the federal agenda. Cloud smart, federal data strategy. Jordan, when you're hearing this, and the dialogue and the collaborating, you get to be in a spot where people want to come see you. They come to the lab and they go, I got an idea. I want to use this cloud, but I also want to have it on-prem. I want to make sure nothing gets compromised. How are you conveying that this early adoption, late adoption of cloud and data is actually a good thing moving forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. So cloud in and of itself, right, from an energy sector control system perspective, is there's still hesitancy, right, associated with cloud, right? There's a culture around the data, the devices, the infrastructure that any of the stakeholders, such as utilities, might have to monitor and control the system for reliability, right? It's all stovepiped. It's behind their walled garden. They own it, they operate it, they manage it, they know what's there. It makes sense for them. However, given this transformation that we're currently going through, and from a relative perspective, it's happening very quick, right? For a sector that typically moves at glacial speed, things are happening very, very rapidly, especially at the distribution system level. And we talk about democratization of data. Well, I think that part of that transformation is actually democratization of energy, right? Where my panels on my roof, right? A commercial entity, all these things are really happening, right? To be able to share an electron, right, across the system, no matter where it exists, right? A more distributed approach. So that democratization of energy necessarily means some democratization of data. And to be able to get that data from one place to another where it can be shared meaningfully and analyzed, more importantly, cloud has just come up, right, as a natural solution for some of these problems. However, transition to the cloud for the energy sector, right, requires some due diligence and some work in making sure that the stakeholders and the people, right, within the energy sector, right, have all the information they can have to make an intelligent, risk-based decision about what applications and what data makes sense for the cloud. So we're doing a lot of work, right, at NREL and trying to characterize and understand these problems. Will talked about, which I thought was a really great point, where you can't going in, right? You don't necessarily know with all the data that exists a priori what those use cases are going to be. And within the energy sector, right, we're very hesitant for good reasons to use the grid, right, as a test bed, right, to understand how this data can be used. And so what we're trying to do with some of the capabilities and folks we have at NREL is basically create these synthetic environments that are operationally realistic, throw these sorts of use cases, right, within these environments to hopefully give the industry and the sector, right, some credence and some confidence about the type of data, how it can be secured, and what use cases are suitable to be able to use cloud. Right, there's cloud's already here. I just want to put that on the record, right? Utilities and folks around the sector are already using it, right? Both on-prem and off-prem. A lot of times it's a hybrid approach. But sort of the irony here is that where we're seeing folks move to the cloud fastest are the ones that are much smaller, right? That don't have the large teams to be able to manage a large data center, who don't have teams with AI ML experience, right? That can implement solutions to help us with this transition, where we're saying, with all of this, repatriation of renewable energy that's intermittent, I need AI ML solutions to help me do a 1 day, 2 day, 15-day ahead forecast to understand what will these intermittent resources do, right, in the future, so that I can plan ahead of time to make sure that I can maintain reliability on a system despite the intermittency that we might see. And so, yeah, really, really important technology. And, like I said, cloud is here. I think it's going to be here to stay. It's just a matter of understanding, hey, how do we do this responsibly, given in light of the changes that we're seeing happening fairly rapidly across the sector?
Well said. Hey, folks, and those listening, we have a nice attentive audience. You don't want to leave, because we're going to do this cool section that I know everybody wants to hear. And that is maybe asking, in this case, Yemi, a little bit of homework to give the audience. Two, I also think, Will and Sean, it would be cool to hear about, the path forward in a fiscal year. Forget continuing resolutions for a minute and omnibus bills. There's plenty of money out there. There's trillions of dollars in the infrastructure law. I find it to be very helpful when industry would come in to say, I want 4 meetings a year with you, Pete, or I'd ask them to, and say, just tell me what you're doing this quarter. What's happened in the economy and in society that matters to me now? We all know budgets are forecasted 2 years out. We don't know what's going to happen between now and then, things like pandemics. And then we all know about the reprioritizing of dollars. But a software roadmap, a technology mission transformation agenda, whatever it's called in government these days, I think that's helpful. And anybody listening today, it's not what keeps you up at night, it's what matters now. And I think there's an expectation on government and industry, both sides, to be attentive and curious and stay alert. So with that, Yemi, fiscal year 23, we're 3 months in. Give us some vision and excitement about things you're working on.
Yeah, I will tell you, I'm going to weave in some of the stuff Jordan said. There's a lot of good stuff here. For TSA, I mean, I said it a couple of times, our goal really is to facilitate free and safe transport, right, of people and goods. Some of what we've seen, and that includes pipeline. And, we've been saying it for a while. Sometimes folks are surprised, but, what's in the back of our head right now, Colonial Pipeline, how do we stop that from happening? A lot of that is data sharing for threats. A lot of that is data sharing for how we manage technology and protect it. We have security directives going out to help baseline what a secure environment is. So we'll be leaning forward on that. As far as data transformation, it's really, as someone in the questions in the chat talked about, how do we enable the culture around that? One of the things we're doing is going to increase the overall data IQ for TSA. And then when it's about democratization, it's about everyone can have data and understand that everyone can have the right data. So as we promote that culture, transformation for us is, how do we enable information that sits in systems, information that sits in OT equipment, to be abstracted, integrated, and shared in an easy manner? And that's one of the biggest things that we'll be looking at in FY23. The other thing is, there is so much data in transportation systems, and people that traverse transportation. In the airlines alone, there's 2.5 million people that travel every day. And that's just airlines. We haven't gotten into rail. We haven't gotten into public transportation. So how do we get all that information together so that we can make decisions? Because as Jordan said, it's about the data, but it's about what the data means. How is a plane and a train correlated, and how does a threat traverse both those transportation modes, and what does it mean about the actual airport and the threat landscape? So taking all that data, synthesizing it, making it available, and what is the kind of the process and the power behind that. You kind of mentioned the CIO and the CIO being in the middle. I always, my dad joke is that, the acronym for CIO is I is always in the middle. And that's what the CIO is, the orchestrator, the collaborator, the connector. And so what we do is make sure that we understand how the mission understands the data, how the technician understands the data, how the customer understands the data. So we ensure we take all that and we orchestrate it in a way that you can have a great customer experience. You can deliver on the mission. You can manage the data in a way that it isn't costly. And Jordan mentioned something about cloud. You heard it here from me, because I know industry's out there. TSA is a hybrid environment. It's going to be a hybrid environment today. It's going to be a hybrid environment tomorrow. I think that's very important to understand, because there will be private cloud assets that we own, and there's a reason for that. I mean, you come talk to me, I can tell you why. But taking all that together, TSA's transformation is going to be on many different layers. One's the culture. Two is really show how to build a powerful data repository. Sean mentioned the word mesh. That'll be involved in there. Understanding data. And then really three is on that back end with technicians. How do you have a cost-effective way and a lean way of getting data to everybody?
Yeah, man, that's like stand up and applaud kind of stuff. And pops to your dad, eyes always in the middle. I'm stealing it and giving Yemi's dad credit for that one. That's amazing. No, seriously. I mean, I was like getting goosebumps as a former Fed that this is what people need to hear. You will be able to watch this again and hear from it. All right, we got 11 minutes. I'm going to jump up to Sean and Will, and then remember, parting shots. We're going to finish right on time. Sean, forecast, Swish data, right? You hear Yemi say this. You have a partnership in DHS, as does Confluent, and all this great stuff. Talk about what you're excited about with Swish and how you're mapping to government needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a government mapping, we focus on 4 major practice areas, and that's all we do. We do IT modernization, which is kind of the cloud stuff we talked about, and a bit of the app framework, data engineering. And that's about how do we collect the data, get it governed properly, and unlock the value so you can visualize it and make decisions, or automate around it in many cases. Third and fourth are really things that cross-cut almost any large enterprise solution. One is we do performance engineering, things like Google Site Reliability Engineering, SRE, or DevOps go hand in hand, but the ability to run stuff at massive enterprise scale is what we specialize at. We run the VA Enterprise Cloud's AI Ops Fabric, which is a very large environment collecting hundreds of thousands of device information to make sense of it. And then we do cybersecurity, because those things are basically 2 sides of the same coin, right? We got to make sure it's secure, and that's needed, but the performance is much more important for the customer experience, the workforce productivity, and to run it lean. Like Yemi said, we understand that CIOs and CDOs don't have unlimited budgets, and that the better we can work together across the agency to make value of their limited dollars, especially with inflation taking effect next year and this past year, those dollars don't go as far. Even if you get a small increase, you're probably really losing 7% of your effective dollar if you're a CIO in government, due to price increases on products and licenses. So getting teams to work together, and folks like Yemi or Jordan that can build the baseline, or that platform that unlocks and unleashes the value of data, and ideally the productivity of the workforce and those decisions, so you can operate more efficiently, more effectively, and collaborate across agencies with shared services, is critical for our government leaders to take advantage of, and really build those relationships and partnerships, not just in their agency with stakeholders, but across to other agencies.
Well said, Will. Jumping down to you, but one quick takeaway: massive scalability, secure by design. By the way, I love the chat going on, and I appreciate everybody from Greg's reach out to Yuri's. Folks, this is the way to communicate while we're all sharing, and you can watch this again at a later date, but this is your time to talk directly to Yemi and others. So let's do that. Will, thoughts on what's been said and the Confluent vision for 23?
Yeah, I mean, Confluent's partnering with the government on a lot of important things, and has been for a while, things like cybersecurity and command and control and the DoD and IoT and et cetera. So those are all really, really important. The thing that's getting me excited, I guess, for the future is something that we were just talking about, and that is really the ability to exchange data across agency boundaries, but do it in real time. I think like data.gov was a huge step forward in just getting people to understand it's important to share data, full stop. But, I think moving to a time when TSA can immediately determine something and share it with all the rest of the its DHS partners so that they can make immediate decisions is really, really important. Rob Brown, unfortunately, he just retired from government service, actually just a few weeks ago. But he was a great example of someone who was really focused, like Yemi, on enabling data sharing with partners. And so I had the privilege of collaborating with him on that, as well as in addition to some of his peers, which is how do we enable real-time flow across agencies? And it's worth checking out his presentation he gave a couple months ago at Current, which was sort of the successor to Kafka Summit. So you can just Google it. But I think the bottom line is Confluent partnering with government to enable agencies to have immediate access to new data from its mission partners is going to be profoundly important for all departments across government.
Right, great points, Jordan. I'm going to come to you. Do you have any thoughts on what's been said? Because I'm actually going to start you with a parting shot. Anything these folks said?
No, I mean, agree with everything here. You know, just from my perspective, you know, again, kind of with NREL being sort of a leader in sort of that future energy transformation and where are we really going. You know, it's just more and more here that you're seeing that utilities and other stakeholders are increasingly as much data companies as they are folks that are really actually managing, you know, and maintaining reliability of the grid, because data is just increasingly important from an operations and reliability perspective. And so as a national lab, right, we're trying to, you know, posture ourselves too to kind of address that paradox of, yes, we understand data is important, but the source of data, right, that exists in order for us to really move the ball forward or advance the state of the art, and how do we collect, understand, and operationalize that data at a fast pace? You know, we're trying to be that source for industry, and then finally, you know, I think where we're all going to in this exchange of information across government. You know, I think for the energy sector, it's much broader than that. But it's really about how do we fuse data together, right? That data fusion combination of IT, OT, operational data in a way that we can understand it so that we can, from a cyber perspective, as one very small use case, and just going from how do we do anomaly detection, but be able to say with confidence, that's not just anomalous, but that's malicious. And that, so we need to be able to do something about it. And so, yeah, so data is just a huge component to all of this. And so, yeah, we're kind of at the ground floor trying to help guide industry in that respect.
All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to do my parting shot first. I'm going to go to Sean. I'm going to go to Will. I'm going to come back to Jordan to take a breath. And then we're finishing with the man, Yemi. You're all the men, but Yemi, we want to finish with you. Here's my takeaway. First of all, Tamika Kirk, shout out to you for participating. Tamika, great person to know at the United States Department of Energy Caesar organization, rock star, and anyone else who's been on the chat. So thank you for attending T. It's good to almost see you yesterday. Here's my parting shot, folks. Today is a day where you all know individuals now, whether you're in industry or government. I would obviously encourage anybody on this call or on this screen here, stay in touch. You're on a first name basis. We know where we went to college. We have connections. Connect at a human level. Everybody is passionate and purposeful. That's why we do this at Dots and Bridges. Connect dots, build bridges, and do it for the betterment of humanity. That's what we're here for. You all have been amazing. Sean, Will, Jordan, and Yemi, I'm just blessed to know each of you. So parting shots. Sean, I sucked a little air out to give you some time. 30 seconds or less. That's kind of the mantra. Sean, the floor is yours.
All right. The good thing is Swish is nimble, smoke focused, and very accessible. So easy to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Hit our blog site. We'll be posting some how to learn Confluent and Kafka and pulling those in with government context. But these are solved problems. If you're a government agency, figuring out what do you want to do next? How do I get there? I'm not sure. Reach out to me. We have experts along with Confluent and other partners that have done this at massive enterprise scale. We can help you get there quicker and not have to worry about the cybersecurity aspects of it. And then I'll throw out a shout out for free codecamp.org. It's a nonprofit. They have amazing data science learning skills. They cost you zero money. Your kids could use it. But if you need to learn data science skills as you get to know data, that's a great place to learn at no cost, as is the Confluent website as well. Tons of free courses. They love the community. And I'm an old Unix sysadmin, so I love giving back to the community and share.
Love it. Thank you again for your service to the country, Sean, and paying it forward. I love it. Will LaForest, floor is yours.
I'm going to keep this quick. I want to challenge everyone out there that actually wants to, all the leaders in government that want to democratize the data and make it a strategic asset, to think about how you can do so in a way that flows in real time and avoid data silo thinking, right? Because if you don't do that upstream, it won't get downstream in time.
All right. Will LaForest, just for the record, I'm a huge Miami Dolphins fan. And yes, my company colors were built upon that. You look like the head coach a bit. It's a compliment, but you look like Mike McDaniel. All right, Jordan, Yemi, am I lying? Okay. Jordan, parting shot.
Yeah, just want a foot stomp, right? Talking about data, energy democratization, right? It's all about people and relationships. And so one of the big things we have coming up this year is really focusing on distribution cybersecurity and understanding what is the energy transformation, why is cybersecurity important, what do we do about it, and how do we prioritize. All of that is incredibly important from a relationships perspective. There's so many stakeholders at the distribution system level. And so we at NREL are just trying to be at the middle of this, build some bridges, as you like to say, Pete, and get people in the same room talking, because as I said, data is being exchanged by more and more stakeholders. And the only way to find solutions to these problems is get people in the same room and talk about it.
Love it. You're the man, Jordan. Safe travels back to Colorado. Yemi, floor's yours, brother.
Yeah, so I would have foot stomp what Will said about the Rob Brown, who I've worked with for a long time and walked that data journey with him. Go ahead and see the presentation. It'll also help you give an idea of the things the way I think and what we're trying to do at TSA. But I will tell you, TSA is going to do a lot of cool things in FY23. We love to engage, and it's not just at the CIO area. We have something called the Innovation Task Force. Love to engage with a lot of great people there. We got a chief innovation officer, because we do things where we even innovate with bomb sniffing dogs. So it's a large mission, huge mission. We want to engage, and we're looking to do some big things here. So I won't dip more into data because we talked about it a lot, but I just want to tell you, I'm happy to be here, excited to meet each and every one of you on this call, and have a great holiday.
Amen to that. Listen, all of us who attended, all the wonderful folks who registered, this will be online. We're going to put it back out there. Yemi, Jordan, Sean, Will, thank you again. Background, Miriam, Jeremy, the crew, Kate Madden helping out with things, John White. Shout out to Rob Brown. He helped me on a little bit prepping for this. I look forward to seeing this topic, addressed. And again, thank you for all for your time, and have a wonderful, safe holiday.